Hello, Flyin Miata fans. I know we brought you here with a promise of a V8 dyno run, but this is the nature of doing research and development. The car was on the dyno for a reason. We found it had a problem, and so we're fixing that problem before it can be dynoed again. So, no V8 dyno run for you right now. We'll come back to that one later. What we do have instead is we'll give you a tour of this Exocet we're building. You saw this briefly last week when we walked through the shop, but this is an Exocet sport frame that we are putting a ludicrous amount of horsepower and torque into. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Exocet, the concept started in England. A fellow named Stuart Mills came up with a design to use old Miatas that had failed their MOT, their annual safety checks. You could basically take what we call the roller skate of the Miata, like we saw earlier in that V8 video. Take the engine, transmission, rear end, suspension, take it off the rusty old chassis, and drop in a 2-liter space frame. Losing a bunch of weight, making it a kit car at that point, making a lot of fun. A company called Exomotive brought it over to the US, and they started manufacturing it in the US. As part of that process, they digitized the frame, they ran it through CAD modeling. We ended up with a US frame that is considerably stiffer than the original. And in the US, it has turned into an excellent choice of track cars. People are using these things to build crazy little track machines of all sorts, with 4 cylinders, I think there's one with a Volvo 5-cylinder being built, V6s, and of course V8s. Years ago we built one with a supercharged LS3 556 horsepower V8. This one's only going to get 430. But I figured I'd show you around the chassis right now while we still have it bare. We built this car on a bare chassis. We took the bare steel, put it all together, got it running, and then tore it down again to have it powder coated. The reason we did that was to allow us to make a bunch of changes to it. For example, the original Exocet frame doesn't give you any way to mount headlights. So there's a bunch of different ways you can do that. You can clamp things on. In this case, we designed this bracket, welded it on there, and then when it's in powder coated, now it's permanently part of the frame. There's little changes, little modifications like that all over the place. We've added little tabs where we can hook up brake lines, so we have anchors for the hard lines on the brakes. Some people will use flexible lines for the whole car. We like to use hard lines up to the edge of suspension, just like Mazda does. We've added on brackets to hold the bodywork, such as it is. And we've added more brackets. This car, because it's a V8, we're using up a lot more of the engine bay with engine, so we're having to move the radiator in the front. So we designed and built this bracket here that will hold the radiator and an oil cooler. And it's suspended on the front of the frame with a couple of rubber isolators on each side. They're not all here, don't mind that. So that's a couple of the changes. We'll head around here. We're getting ready to do ironically, some sound insulation here. They'll sort of cut down on the oil can noise you can get from big panels. We've set this thing up to use some race seats. We'll show you those in a moment. And this is where they'll mount, so we have the mounts of the race seats in place. It's a fairly big race seat. The owner of this car is a larger individual, so we had to do quite a bit of surgery to the transmission tunnel in order to get it to fit. This again is one of the things that we have to do before powder coat, otherwise it'll look terrible. So that's another reason why we built it as a bare frame and then powder coated it. Here's another special touch. We're putting a fuel-safe fuel cell in this car, and in order to get the fuel to feed properly into it, we had to put the filler up relatively high, and so we designed and welded that bracket into place. And the cell will sit in here on top of the factory rear subframe. Again, a few more brackets and things that will hold down various components. These parts are for Zeus fasteners. These will use to hold on the rear fuel tank cover. But there's also little brackets for pumps and things all over the place we've added in. So the basic frame, you get the idea. There's not much to this car other than what you see here. We're going to bolt in the Mazda parts, and the bodywork consists of a nose cone, a hood, a cover for the fuel tank, and then a lower clear panel that comes along here, and that's basically it. They're what's known as an exoskeleton car, and they're just ridiculously fun to drive. We're a dealer for the Exocet, in case you hadn't guessed. We don't. This is the last one we'll be building in-house. We're moving away from building them ourselves, but we happily will provide the kits for you. show you some of the other parts that are going on in this thing. Where's he going? There he goes. This is the big noise. 6.2 liter Chevy V8, the ubiquitous LS3. People get tired of these things being put in everything, but you know, they get used because they work. They're small. They have what's called very high power density in terms of the amount of power and torque you get out of a very small box is stupendous. So people are always asking about things like Coyotes and Hemis and Mercedes V12s or whatever. But the fact of the matter is that nothing simply comes in this packaging size. The Coyote is considerably larger because it has dual overhead cam heads, so it's got this big bulky valve train on each side of the car, or each side of the engine, that makes it much harder to fit. So, like it or not, it's everywhere for a reason. So this is a crate engine. This is a 430 horse standard LS3, the same sort of thing you would have found in a Camaro SS a couple of years ago, or the previous generation Corvette. Here's one of the wheels and tires. This is something that comes out of the history of the Exocet, because it was originally designed to deal with the wheels and tires that came off a donor, you know, a donor that had failed safety. It doesn't have a lot of clearance around the rear tires. It's got those big arcing rails on the top. So this is the sort of tire it was designed to deal with. So in order to make these big guys fit, we have to push them outboard. We have to mess with the offset. So you can see this is a very deep dish wheel. This is a wheel that would not fit on a Miata happily. It would take quite a bit of work to get this puppy underneath the fenders. But in the case of the Exocet, it gives us what we need to get the wheel a long way out from the chassis. That's a 10.5-inch wheel with a 245 on it, by the way. So that's a lot of rubber. And a couple of parts sitting around here. We built a custom. It's a custom dual exhaust in here. It was actually built for us by a shop here in town. This is only part of it, but it should be a sporty looking little thing when it's in there. It'll sit in the car this way, so you'll see the back of the muffler. That'll be a pretty cool looking little unit. Down. Here's the rear subframe. Factory rear subframe normally would be unmodified, but in this case, because we're putting in the fuel cell, we had to put in a cage for it. This is also a bracket for the charcoal canister, because we're actually using an E-rod engine on this thing, which means it has a bunch of evaporative and emissions controls on it. So just because this thing is going to be 1,800 pounds and 430 horsepower doesn't mean it has to be dirty. So that's room to put all that in place. This is the dashboard such as it is. We have an AIM MXL2. It's a really nice digital display that integrates well with the GM engine computer. And this will let us program this to show exactly what we need to show. We can do custom warnings on this thing. It has a sequential tachometer across the top. Very programmable, very customizable, but lets us show the customer exactly what they need to see. They can flip, they can even do lap timing, predictive lap timing, and review their sessions right on this thing right here. A few more bits and pieces. These are parts that just came back from powder coat. Most of these are here this is all battery retainage, shall we say. Battery lockdown. Here is one of the headlights. These are Dominator 2s, popular in the Exomotive community because they kind of look like bugs, and who doesn't like headlights that look like bugs? There we go. Oh dear. And we have, for turn indicators and side markers, little crazy bright LEDs. They're in here, and that'll be wired. That'll be plugged into this little hole right there. So it'll be low key and subtle, but let me tell you, these suckers are bright enough, you'll see those from a distance. And of course, because we've already had this together once, it's all pre-wired. Now it's just a matter of assembling this car. It should go pretty quickly. Let's put this away. Oh, and the seat. You can see one of the things about an Exocet is that the control arms are on display. They're hanging out in the breeze. So we gave these a coat of fresh powder coat because it looks good. Basically, it won't protect them anymore, do anything, but it looks awesome. So that's a big part of it. These are heat shields for the motor mounts, and we've hit them with lizard skin to help protect the motor mounts from all the heat that this engine will generate. They have a tendency to melt otherwise. This is just a factor of the type packaging of the Miata platform with a big V8. Here's our seat. It's significantly larger than most race seats that you'll see in a Miata. I'm not sure you could fit this in a Miata, honestly. We have two of these. They're both going in this car. They will fit just about anybody in one of these things. I know some race drivers who would flop around in this thing. They need pillows to make it fit, but nice thing about the Exocet, you've got a little more space than usual. Rubber bushings, getting ready to go into the control arms. One thing you can see on this, the headers for the V8, we've had them swain coated. They've got that white ceramic coat on them. That'll help keep the heat under control a little bit, keep it from melting its motor mounts, keep it from melting the driver, and also just plain looks good. But mostly it's there to keep everything from melting everything else, which is always important. It's got a little catch can going on. This is it's not a dedicated track vehicle, but it's designed so it can be used on the track. This car will see track use, but it won't be racing wheel to wheel. So that's why it's got the mix of safety upgrades with the fuel cell. It's going to have full harnesses on those seats, of course, but it doesn't have a full cage, just the integrated roll bar, which is a pretty safe little roll bar. It's well integrated into the chassis, but it's not a full cage. Matt, did we have any questions coming in? I'm answering every single question. Or rather, there's like 2 people watching. Some guy in Omaha got nothing else to do. I don't know if we have anything else, so we can have a look at the fuel cell. And I apologize for the lack of roaring V8s today, but we'll take care of that. Here's the cell itself. Fuel safe makes good stuff. There's a rigid plastic tank inside this box, so it's well protected, but has that little bit of flexibility in case of an impact to keep it from getting damaged. And all sorts of craziness. It's got a built-in pump inside here, so all of the fuel is basically integrated inside this unit. This is the fuel pressure regulator / filter that's used on the Corvette, and we use it as well in our GM conversion, our V8 conversions, because it provides just the right fuel pressure. It's really easy to get if you need replacements. You know, if you down the road you're going to need to replace your fuel filter. Easy to get everywhere. So try to use as many OE parts as possible when we're doing this. And there's a wing, of course. Carbon fiber APR goodness. Kind of a crazy looking shape for a wing. This whole 3D wing design thing makes sense if you're designing for a certain car. I'm not sure it necessarily makes sense when you're putting on a tube frame, running through the air in a hurry, but it's a pretty dramatic looking little thing. And it should make a difference. It may not be the most efficient wing for the job, but it will be certainly a very effective wing for the job. So, a lot of camber on that thing. There we go. Okay. There's a few boxes of bits and pieces kicking around up here. There's the hood. And actually you can see here's so the hood is just a single piece. We've designed it, it's not hinged. We've got it so it'll just come right off. You pop off those 2 Zeus fasteners on the side and the 2 clamps on the back, and then you can lift the hood off. It's the easiest way to work on the car. You also put it in your head as well as a Halloween costume if you want to do it. It goes Mr. Exocet. And then here's the tail, which has been prepped. So this is the entire rear bodywork. LED tail lights, standard 4-inch round, so if they break, they're easy to get replacements again. With little bright LEDs to be used for reverse lights. I'm assuming those are reverse lights. And we have these lit up bolts to work as a license plate light. The goal is to make these, fully legal, fully usable street cars. They're not the most convenient thing to use day to day. They're kind of like a motorcycle that doesn't fall over. You will get rocks in your face. You will come home from every single drive buzzed, but doesn't mean you can't drive it on the road. This again is just attached with Zeus fasteners. The little quarter turns that pop it in there. Makes it really easy to get on and off. Taking the back off will be a little more complicated because you will have to deal with the fuel system, but there you go. This is left over from our first 1999 Miata. Back in 1998, we bought one of the early ones that came off the boat. That was its license plate. It has since moved on, but its license plate remains apparently. me why. Okay. Well, that is a whirlwind tour of an upcoming V8 Exocet. We'll give you periodic updates on this as we go. It is going to be a pretty dramatic little car when it's done. It's just in the assembly stage now, so we'll check in every couple of weeks and see how it's coming. In the meantime, if you have any questions, even if the video is over, just go ahead and put them in the comments. We will answer them as best we can. And thanks for watching.